Around 9 p.m., she walked into the living room, the air heavy with something unspoken. The TV flickered, half holding my attention, but I could sense her presence, standing still, clutching her phone like she was making some monumental decision. I felt the tension before she even spoke. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice a little too casual, almost rehearsed. "I'm going out tonight." I glanced over at her. Emily, my wife of 6 years, was standing there dressed to the nines. Her hair perfectly styled, the coat giving her the look of someone about to walk into an exclusive party. But there was no party tonight. She had no plans. At least, none that I knew of. "Out where?" I asked, trying to stay calm, but something twisted deep inside me. She usually went out with her friends, but tonight felt off. It was midweek, completely random, no warning whatsoever. She hesitated for a second, her expression unreadable. Then, with a nonchalance that made my stomach drop, she said, "I'll be staying the night with someone." Time seemed to freeze. What did she just say? "Who?" I managed to ask, though my voice came out quieter than I expected. She was already moving. Picking up her keys like this was the most normal thing in the world. "Does it matter?" She shot back, not even glancing in my direction. "Does it matter?" I got off the couch, disbelief flooding me as I stared at her, but she didn't stop, didn't even acknowledge my shock. She moved like a machine, like a version of her I didn't recognize. My brain scrambled to process what was happening, but nothing made sense. No explanation. No regret. Just that haunting phrase. "I'll be staying the night with another man." Then, like something out of a cheap, cliched movie, she left. No fight, no yelling, no dramatic confrontation. The door closed behind her with a finality that echoed through the house. The silence felt suffocating. I stood there, rooted in place, staring at the door. Something about the calmness with which she walked out felt eerie, like this had already been decided, and there was nothing I could do. My hands trembled, my mind a blur, stuck between fury and heartbreak. But then, something snapped inside me. I wasn't just going to sit there. Not this time. She thought she could walk out, drop a bomb like that, and I'd just sit there, clueless. No way. I grabbed my phone, keys, and jacket, my heart pounding, adrenaline flooding my veins. I wasn't going to let this go without answers. I was going to follow her. I threw on my jacket, moving quickly, the adrenaline burning away the paralysis. My brain screamed, "What are you doing?" But my legs carried me forward. My wife had just told me she was spending the night with another man, then walked out as if it were nothing. Not even an attempt to hide it. That's what stung the most, the indifference. It was like she didn't care enough to cover her tracks. She left it out there, hanging like a challenge, and I wasn't going to let that slide. I stepped into the cold night air, and there she was, walking to her car, unhurried, like she had all the time in the world. I stayed in the shadows, watching as she got in, the headlights of her car flaring to life. She backed out of the driveway, and I followed, slipping into my car, the engine rumbling beneath me. I wasn't sure where this would end, but I needed to know where she was going. I needed to know who this guy was. We hit the main road, and I kept a few cars back, my hands tight on the wheel, eyes locked on her taillights. Left then right, through familiar streets, and for a moment I thought maybe she's just going to a friend's house. Maybe this was all some kind of twisted misunderstanding. But then she turned into a hotel parking lot, and all the hope drained from me. I parked a few rows back, the engine still running, staring at her through the windshield. She got out of the car, casually glancing at her phone as she walked toward the entrance. No hesitation. No second thoughts. She didn't even look back. The hotel lights stretched long shadows across the pavement, and it felt like the walls of my world were closing in. My chest tightened. I didn't know what to do next. My mind raced. Part of me wanted to storm in after her, grab her, and demand answers. But another part of me just sat there, frozen, staring at the entrance, as if the pieces of my life had shattered, and I was left in the dark, trying to gather them. How did we get here? In a hotel parking lot, my wife meeting some stranger like our life together didn't even matter? I sat in my car, heart pounding, unable to process what I was seeing. And then I saw him. A tall, broad-shouldered guy, early 30s, clean-cut, stepped out of the hotel lobby. He had this smug, confident grin plastered on his face, and there she was, walking right up to him like they'd done this 100 times. They hugged, way too close for it to be anything innocent. My stomach twisted, bow rising in my throat. Who was this woman? This wasn't Emily. This wasn't the wife I'd spent 6 years with, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone. No, this was someone else entirely, someone I didn't recognize. And before I could even think, they vanished into the hotel together. For a second, I thought I might black out from the sheer force of the rage building inside me. My fist clenched around the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles went white. Everything I thought I knew about our marriage, our life, shattered in front of me. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some spur-of-the-moment bad decision. No, this was planned, premeditated. Emily had walked out on me to meet another man at a hotel, with no shame, no remorse, just cold calculation. Without even realizing it, I was out of the car, slamming the door behind me, my feet moving before my mind could catch up. I stormed across the parking lot, headed straight for the hotel entrance, not caring if I was loud, not caring if anyone saw. What was the point? They were inside, together, and I was going to end this here and now. The hotel doors slid open with a soft whoosh, but the sound was drowned out by the hammering of my heart in my ears. I blew past the front desk, ignoring the receptionist's polite, "Can I help you?" My focus was on one thing, the elevator. They'd gone up, I knew it. Emily always had a thing for booking top-floor rooms, probably thinking it made the whole affair more special, more romantic. And then it hit me, this wasn't new for her. The calm way she had left the house, the ease with which she met that man, it wasn't the first time. They'd done this before. The realization made my blood boil. My hand stabbed at the elevator button, jamming it over and over like it would make the thing move faster. When the doors finally slid open, I stepped inside, feeling an eerie calm settle over me. It was the kind of quiet you feel right before everything explodes. The silence in the elevator was suffocating. The soft ding of each floor passing by only stretched the tension tighter. When the doors opened to the top floor, I stepped out into a long, dimly lit hallway, the air thick with stillness. My heart was racing, each beat a thunderclap in my chest, but my mind was laser-focused. I couldn't go back now. I couldn't unsee what I had witnessed. As I walked down the hall, my footsteps heavy on the carpet, something in me snapped. The sadness, the shock, it all evaporated, leaving behind nothing but pure fury. She had lied to me, looked me in the eyes and lied, then packed her things and walked out like I didn't matter at all. Worse, she didn't care that I knew. The way she had said it, so nonchalantly, like I wasn't worth the effort of a lie. That was the part that burned the most. I reached the end of the hallway and stopped. Room 812. My breath was coming fast and hard, my chest heaving. I knew they were in there. I could feel the betrayal seeping out from behind the door. My fists clenched at my sides, every muscle in my body screaming at me to kick the door down. But no, I wasn't going to make a scene. Not yet. First, I wanted to see her face. I wanted her to look me in the eye and know she was caught. I knocked hard, the sound echoing through the quiet hallway. My mind raced, trying to think of what I'd say, but maybe I didn't need to say anything. Maybe just seeing me at the door would be enough to bring it all crashing down around her. I heard movement inside. My pulse quickened, every nerve on edge. A few seconds later, the door creaked open just a crack, and there she was. Emily. Her eyes widened when she saw me, and I could see the recognition, the moment she realized she'd been caught. But instead of guilt, instead of fear, her expression twisted into something unexpected, annoyance. She didn't even bother to open the door all the way. She just stood there, staring at me through the narrow gap, like I was some kind of inconvenience, something that had disrupted her plans. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice low and sharp, as if I were the one who had crossed a line. "What the hell am I doing here?" I shot back, my voice rising with the anger that had been simmering since the moment she walked out the door. "What the hell are you doing here?" she snapped, rolling her eyes like I was nothing more than a nuisance. The casual arrogance in her voice made my blood boil. She was acting like I had no right to be here, no right to feel the way I did. "I told you where I was going," she added, still holding the door halfway closed. "You didn't listen. That's your problem, not mine." My problem? Was she actually serious? My mind reeled at the audacity. "You told me you were staying with another man," I said, stepping forward, trying to push the door open, but she blocked me, keeping it shut as though she was guarding something sacred. "You think I'm just supposed to sit at home and accept that? That I'm going to stay quiet while you're here doing?" My throat clenched up, and I couldn't even finish the sentence. The disgust was too thick. Emily sighed, like this whole thing was just exhausting for her, like she was already over it. "Look, it's none of your business. I don't have to explain myself to you." Her words were laced with ice, completely devoid of emotion, like she couldn't care less about how much this was tearing me apart. I couldn't believe it. The arrogance, the utter indifference. She didn't even bother to lie. No attempt to spin some excuse, no effort to make it right. Just cold, unapologetic dismissal. My pulse quickened, my blood boiling as I pushed harder on the door. This time, she let it swing open, stepping back, and there he was, the guy from the lobby. He stood in the middle of the room, casually slipping his watch back on, not a hint of embarrassment on his face. He didn't even look guilty, just bored, like I was some minor inconvenience that interrupted his evening. "What's up, man?" he said with a half shrug, barely glancing my way. He couldn't have cared less about the destruction he was a part of, like my entire life wasn't crumbling around me. That's when everything inside me snapped. The pain, the confusion, the anger, it all exploded at once. I stepped toward him, fists clenched, ready to tear him apart. But before I could reach him, Emily stepped between us, her face cold and unyielding. "Don't," she said, her voice colder than ice. "You don't get to be angry. You don't get to act like the victim here." "Victim?" I choked on the word, completely stunned. Was this real? "You lied to me. You walked out on me. And now I'm standing here, watching you with this piece of crap, and you think I'm just supposed to be okay with it?" The words came out in a snarl, the disbelief laced with fury. "You're pathetic," she spat, her eyes narrowing. "This isn't about you. It hasn't been about you for a long time. Stop acting like it is." For the first time, the full weight of it hit me. She wasn't sorry. Not even a little. She didn't care how much this hurt me. She didn't care that she was tearing apart everything we had built. In her eyes, I was already history, a relic of a past she had no intention of revisiting. Her words cut through me like a knife, each one sharper than the last. But what hurt the most wasn't her anger. It was the calm certainty in her voice, the way she looked at me with such cold finality. She didn't flinch, didn't waver, as if I was nothing more than an inconvenience she was done with. I stood there, stunned, trying to comprehend how we'd gotten to this point. How had she become this person? How had I not seen this coming? And then, something inside me broke. The part of me that had clung to hope, the part that thought this might still be some kind of nightmare I could wake up from, shattered completely. She had made it clear, this wasn't some mistake. I wasn't even a factor in her life anymore. The Emily I thought I knew, the woman I had married, was gone. The person standing in front of me was a stranger, a cold, heartless stranger who couldn't care less if I burned alive right there in front of her. "You really don't give a damn, do you?" I asked, my voice low, shaking. I could barely recognize myself, standing there, fury and disbelief twisting together into something I could no longer control. Emily folded her arms across her chest, rolling her eyes like I was some child throwing a tantrum. "I've told you before," she said with a condescending calmness. "This isn't working. You just never wanted to listen. So I moved on." "Moved on?" I let out a bitter laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You don't move on by sneaking off to hotel rooms with another guy while you're still married. You didn't even have the decency to end things properly. You just left. Because I was done," she said, her voice steady and unmoved. "I've been done for a long time, but you wouldn't accept it. So yeah, I found someone else. I didn't owe you an announcement. She made it sound so simple, like I was the unreasonable one, expecting basic human decency. My fist clenched at my sides as I took another step closer, fighting to keep from exploding. You couldn't even respect me enough to end it? You had to sneak around, lie to my face, and walk out like I meant nothing to you. Is that how little I mattered? For a second, just for a split second, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes, maybe guilt, maybe something deeper. But then, it was gone. She shrugged, her voice as casual as it was cruel. You were convenient. That's it. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. Convenient? All those years together, all the memories, the moments that meant everything to me, were nothing more than convenience to her. A coldness settled into my bones, replacing the boiling anger with something darker, something final. There was no coming back from this. You could have left. You could have told me, I said, my voice shaking but steady. Instead, you chose to destroy everything in the worst way possible. She rolled her eyes again, exasperated. God, you're so dramatic. You act like this is some huge betrayal. People fall out of love. It happens. Grow up. I looked at her, really looked at her, and it hit me like a tidal wave. This wasn't the woman I thought I had built my life with. She wasn't the person I had loved, trusted, or believed in. She was selfish, cold, and I had been blind to it for far too long. Then, out of nowhere, the guy spoke up. The one who had been standing there like a disinterested bystander, his hands in his pockets as though none of this mattered to him. Look, man, it's not that deep. People move on. It sucks, but it happens. It wasn't the words. It was the way he said them, so casual, so dismissive, like the collapse of my marriage, my entire life, was just a mild inconvenience. The rage that had simmered in the background surged back, hotter than before, and before I knew what I was doing, I took a step toward him, fists clenched. You stay the hell out of this, I snapped, my voice dangerously low. This is between me and my wife. But Emily stepped in front of him, like she was defending him. Don't even think about it, she said, her voice sharp and unyielding. You're not going to make a scene. Not here. A scene? I growled, glaring at her. You're worried about a scene? After all this? After you walked out on me, lied to me, and stood here defending this guy? She didn't even flinch. I'm worried about you making a fool of yourself. But then again, you're good at that. That was it. That was the moment I realized there was no fixing this. No salvaging anything from the wreckage she had caused. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by someone who didn't even see me as human anymore, just an obstacle in her shiny new life with this stranger. I backed up, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me all at once. My hands fell limply to my sides, the fight draining out of me. There was nothing left to fight for. She had destroyed it all. Fine, I said quietly, my voice hollow and unfamiliar. You win. I'm done. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Maybe it was surprise. Maybe it was relief. But it didn't matter anymore. Nothing she did or said mattered. I turned around and walked out, leaving her and that man behind in their hotel room, in their little bubble of betrayal. As I stepped out into the cold night, something shifted inside me. The anger was still there, but it wasn't the same burning fury. It was like smoldering embers, simmering just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to reignite. But I was done with her, done with it all. The only thing left now was deciding how I was going to burn it all down. I got into my car and slammed the door shut, the sound echoing through the empty parking lot. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that I could feel the leather stretching beneath my fingers. In the rearview mirror, the hotel loomed behind me, cold and indifferent, a monument to the death of my marriage. She was up there, with him. Probably not even thinking twice about what had just happened, about me, about us. I sat there, the engine idling, staring straight ahead. I didn't move. Didn't even blink. My mind had gone blank, like everything inside me had short-circuited. The fury that had consumed me in that room had been replaced by a suffocating emptiness. Anger, sadness, betrayal, It all blurred together into a crushing weight, pressing down on me from all sides. One sentence had killed my marriage. One sentence had destroyed everything I thought I knew. "I'll be staying the night with another man." I had stood there, helpless, while she twisted the knife deeper and deeper, and I let it happen. How had I let it get this far? How had I missed the signs, the lies, the way she had slipped away from me? But no. This wasn't about missing signs. This wasn't about me being blind. This was about her. Her selfishness. Her cruelty. The way she treated me like I was nothing more than an obstacle in her way. She had walked all over me, and I had let her. But not anymore. Something had changed in me the moment I walked out of that room. The sadness, the pain, the loss, it was still there, gnawing at me. But there was something else now. Something colder. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen, a plan beginning to form in the back of my mind. I had half a mind to call her parents, tell them exactly what their precious daughter was up to. But then I realized, what did it matter? I didn't care about their sympathy or their judgment. I didn't want anyone's pity. No one could fix this, and no one could make it right. I scrolled through my contacts, my fingers hovering over names that felt irrelevant now. Finally, I landed on the one person who had always been brutally honest with me, Jason, my best friend. He'd seen through Emily long before I had. As much as I hated admitting it, he had been right all along. I needed his voice, his no-nonsense grounding, to keep me from spiraling. I hit dial, and he picked up after 2 rings. "Hey man," he said, his voice groggy. "What's up? Everything okay?" The second I heard his voice, everything poured out in a flood: the hotel, the guy, Emily's cold indifference, how she had tossed our marriage away like it was nothing. I spoke so fast, I didn't even know if I was making sense. When I finally stopped, out of breath, there was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. Then Jason spoke, his voice steady but serious. "Dude, I don't even know what to say. That's messed up. But listen, are you okay? Where are you right now?" "I'm in my car outside the hotel," I admitted, feeling the weight of it all bear down on me again. "I just didn't know where else to go." Jason paused, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. "You need to get out of there. Right now. Don't sit outside that place, man. It's only gonna mess with your head more. Come over. We'll figure this out. But first, get the hell away from that hotel." He was right. Sitting there, staring at the building where she was betraying me wasn't going to help. It was only going to feed the fury, and I didn't trust myself to keep it in check. So I put the car in gear and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving that miserable place in the rearview mirror. The drive to Jason's was a blur. The city lights smeared past me, and I barely noticed them. My mind was racing, replaying every second of the night. The way she had looked at me with disgust, like I was beneath her. The smug, careless attitude of that guy, like he didn't give a damn that he was tearing my life apart. When I finally pulled up in front of Jason's house, he was already at the door. The second I stepped inside, the weight of everything came crashing down on me. The adrenaline wore off, and exhaustion hit me like a freight train. I didn't even make it to the couch before I sank to the floor, my head in my hands. Jason sat down next to me, silent at first, just letting me breathe. He didn't push me to talk, didn't try to fix it. He just sat there, a steady presence, like an anchor in the middle of the storm. After a few minutes, he finally spoke, his voice calm. "You did the right thing by walking away, man. There's nothing you could have done in that room that would have made it better." I shook my head, my voice raw. "I feel like I should have done something more. Punched the guy? Screamed at her? Anything." "No." Jason's response was firm. "That's what they wanted. They were trying to bait you, make you lose it. If you'd snapped, they would have twisted it, made you the bad guy. You walked out with your dignity. That's more than she deserves." I nodded, but deep down, I didn't feel dignified. I felt hollow, broken. Everything I had built with her had crumbled in a single night. "What the hell do I do now?" My voice cracked. "Do I just let her get away with this?" Jason's face hardened. "No. She doesn't get to walk away clean. You have options. Divorce her, take her to court, make sure she knows she messed with the wrong guy. But whatever you do, don't let her crawl back into your head. That's how she wins. His words sank in, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt a spark of clarity. Jason was right. I had to act, but not out of blind rage or desperation. This wasn't just about what Emily had done anymore. It was about how I was going to take back control of my life. She's not going to win, I said quietly, more to myself than to him. Not this time. Jason clapped a hand on my shoulder. That's the spirit. We'll figure this out. But first, you need to sleep. You've been through hell tonight. I knew he was right, but as I lay on his couch later that night, staring up at the ceiling, the exhaustion wouldn't let me drift off. My mind kept replaying everything: Emily's words, her cold eyes, the way she had shrugged me off like I was nothing. The fury simmered beneath the surface, no longer a blazing fire, but embers waiting for the right moment to flare back up. In that dark, quiet room, I made a promise to myself: I wouldn't let her break me. Not completely. She had taken enough from me, but I wasn't going to let her take everything. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Emily had won the battle, but the war wasn't over. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. She wanted to tear me apart? Fine. But I'd be the one who walked away with my head held high. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Lying on Jason's couch, the dull ache in my chest was still there, but it had sharpened. The pain had transformed into something more focused, something that pushed me to act, to take control. The shock of Emily's betrayal had worn off, and now all I could think about was how I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore. She thought she'd already won, thought she could move on like I was some forgotten chapter in her life, but she was wrong. I sat up, rubbing my face, still feeling the weight of the night before, but now a plan was forming in my head. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about taking back control of my life, my house, and my future. Emily had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. Jason was already in the kitchen, brewing coffee. When he saw me, he didn't say anything at first, just slid a mug across the counter. "How you feeling?" he finally asked, leaning back against the counter. "Not good," I admitted, taking a sip of the coffee. The bitterness snapped me awake. "But better than last night. I've been thinking, I can't just sit around and wait for her to screw me over again. I need to act before she does." He nodded, like he'd been expecting me to say that. "You're right. She's not gonna make this easy for you. And from what you've told me, she's already checked out. You have to assume she's planning her next move." I set the mug down, my mind turning over everything that needed to be done. First things first, I need to lock down everything on my end. Finances, the house, everything. I don't trust her not to try to take half of what I built. Hell, for all I know, she's been planning this for a while. Jason gave me a serious look. "Do you have a lawyer?" "Not yet, but that's my next call." We spent the next hour going over the basics, steps I hadn't even thought about. Jason had always been practical, and right now, that's exactly what I needed. As much as I wanted to storm back into that hotel and tear everything apart, I knew that wouldn't help. If Emily was going to be cold and calculated, I had to be twice as sharp. As soon as Jason left for work, I made my first call to a divorce attorney. The conversation was brief and professional. I didn't tell the lawyer everything, just the essentials. I needed to file for divorce immediately, protect my assets, and ensure Emily couldn't sink her claws into anything else. She had made it clear she didn't give a damn about me, so why should I play fair? After I hung up, I felt a strange sense of calm. It was like I had finally taken my first real step toward moving forward. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was making the first move, and it felt good. It felt like I was getting a grip on things again, like I wasn't drowning in the chaos she'd left behind. But as much as I was focused on protecting myself, there was one more thing I had to do. Something personal. I wasn't going to disappear from her life like she expected. Emily was going to feel this, the same way I'd felt it last night. She thought I was the weak, clueless husband, but I was about to show her how wrong she was. I grabbed my phone and pulled up her number, hesitating for a second. Then I sent her a text, short and to the point. I filed for divorce. You can stay with him. It felt like a punch I'd been holding back finally landed. I imagined her reading it, sitting next to that guy, thinking she'd gotten away with everything, only to have her perfect little world interrupted. I wasn't her safety net anymore. She could have her new life, her new man, but she wasn't getting any part of me in the process. A few minutes passed. No reply. Fine by me. The silence was almost more satisfying than any word she could have sent back. That evening, I went back to the house. I knew she wouldn't be there yet, probably still with him, pretending like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. As I walked through the door, the place felt different. Empty, but in a good way. It was like the weight of her presence, the suffocating tension that had been hanging over our home for months, had finally lifted. I went from room to room, gathering up anything of hers that was still lying around. Her clothes, her books, all those stupid little knickknacks she insisted on keeping everywhere, they all went into boxes. As I packed her things, I felt lighter, as if with every item I put away, I was reclaiming space, reclaiming pieces of my life that she had tried to take from me. The house was mine again. My future was mine again. As I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the boxes of her things, I realized something. I wasn't just clearing out physical reminders of her. I was clearing out the emotional clutter she'd left behind. Every piece of her I packed away was one less hold she had over me. And I wasn't going to stop until every last trace of her was gone. I wasn't the same person I had been yesterday. I threw everything into that box, the clothes, the trinkets, all the little remnants of what was left of our life together. Each item felt like a weight being lifted off my chest, like I was reclaiming space that had been suffocating me for too long. This was my space now, and I was taking it back, piece by piece. Just as I packed away the last of her things, my phone buzzed on the counter. A text. I already knew it was her before I even picked it up. Emily. We need to talk. I stared at the screen for a long moment, a strange sense of satisfaction creeping over me. Now she wanted to talk? After I'd finally made it clear I wasn't playing her game anymore? It was too late for that. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of thinking she still had control over me. Let her wonder, let her squirm. She had no power here anymore. I set the phone down and grabbed the box of her things, heading for the front door. I wasn't going to let them sit in my house another second longer. I was done with her, with the lies, with the betrayal. I was ready to burn every last bridge if that's what it took. As I tossed the box into the trunk of my car, I felt something shift, the first real taste of freedom. She wasn't going to win. Not this time. I drove across town, the box rattling in the back, while the streetlights flickered by like silent witnesses. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than necessary, grounding myself as Emily's text echoed in my head. Now she wants to talk? After everything, now that I had filed for divorce? I wasn't stupid. This wasn't about reconciliation. She wasn't sorry. She would never be sorry. This was about control, about her realizing she wasn't the one calling the shots anymore. But I wasn't going to let her pull me back into that web. I'd already made my decision. I was done being her pawn. The plan was simple: drop her stuff at Claire's place. Claire, her best friend, the one who always had Emily's back no matter what, lived just 10 minutes away. Claire was loyal to Emily in the way that loyalty always trumped morality. That's why I didn't care. Let Claire take all of it. Let her be Emily's refuge. As long as Emily stayed away from me. When I pulled up to Claire's house, I grabbed the box from the trunk, heavier than I expected, as though it carried the weight of everything I was leaving behind. I rang the doorbell and waited. A minute passed, and then another. Finally, the door creaked open, and there she was, Claire. That same fake sympathetic expression she always gave me, like she knew everything before I did. "Jake?" she said, her voice soft, like I was some wounded animal. "What's going on?" "I'm done," I said, getting straight to the point. "Here's her stuff. Make sure she gets it." Claire's eyes flickered between me and the box, hesitation written all over her face. You're really doing this? You're just walking away? I almost laughed. Walking away? If only it had been that easy. She made her choice, I said coldly. I'm just clearing out the rest of it. Claire hesitated again, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the right words. I'll make sure she gets it, she finally said. Good. I turned and started walking back to my car, but just before I could leave the porch, her voice stopped me. She never thought you'd actually do it, you know? She didn't think you'd be the one to leave. I froze for a moment. There it was, the truth I'd always known, but hearing it out loud was like a punch to the gut. Emily thought she had me wrapped around her finger, thought I'd stay no matter what she did. Well, she was wrong. Without looking back, I replied, I'm not waiting around for her to destroy what's left. I got in the car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving Claire and all the baggage that came with Emily behind me. The streets were quieter now, emptier, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was actually moving forward, literally and figuratively. The weight of it all was finally lifting. But just as I turned onto the main road, my phone buzzed again. Another text. I didn't want to look, but curiosity got the better of me. It was from Emily again. Meet me at the house. Now. I clenched my jaw, the anger bubbling back up. I was tempted to ignore it, but something inside me told me I needed to see this through. I needed closure, one way or another, even if it meant one last face-to-face confrontation. She wasn't going to get away with this without feeling some consequence. I swung the car around and headed back toward the house. The entire drive, I kept thinking about what she could possibly want to say. What was left after all of this? What more could she possibly take from me? As I neared the house, the familiar knot in my chest returned, but this time, it wasn't fear. It was determination. I had given her everything, and now it was my turn to take something back. Whatever she had to say, it wouldn't change a thing. I was done playing by her rules. What could she possibly have left to explain? Maybe she thought she could twist the knife one last time, or maybe she believed she could guilt me into staying in the wreckage she had created. Either way, I wasn't walking in there blind. I had my defenses up now. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was already there. She hadn't even bothered to go back to the hotel, or wherever she'd spent the night. She was waiting for me, leaning against the side of her car, arms crossed, eyes cold and calculating. Gone was the carefree, reckless woman from the night before. This was a different Emily, one ready for a fight. But I wasn't the same Jake she thought she could push around anymore. I got out of the car, slamming the door a little harder than necessary, and walked up to her. Neither of us spoke at first. The tension between us was thick, a silent battleground. Finally, she broke the silence. So, divorce? She said, her voice sharp, dripping with disbelief and anger. That's how you're handling this? I stared at her, unflinching. What did you expect? You told me you were staying with another man. You think I'm just going to sit around and wait for you to decide when you're done? She pushed off the car, stepping closer, her eyes flashing with irritation. You're overreacting. This isn't how I thought things would go. We were supposed to work through this. We've been together for years, Jake. You don't just throw that away. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Work through this? I repeated, disbelief creeping into my voice. Emily, you walked out on me to meet some guy at a hotel. You didn't even bother hiding it. What exactly were we supposed to work through after that? She huffed, like I was the unreasonable one. It's not that simple. We've been drifting apart for months, Jake. You just didn't see it. I needed something different, something new, but that doesn't mean I didn't care about us. You needed something new? I echoed, shaking my head. And what? I was just supposed to sit back and wait for you to get it out of your system. Is that the kind of relationship you thought we had? Her eyes narrowed. You're acting like I'm the only one at fault here. You haven't exactly been present, Jake. You buried yourself in work. You didn't even notice when I started pulling away. This isn't just on me. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. You're unbelievable. You think this is about me working too much? That justifies everything you've done? You couldn't even be honest with me, and now you're trying to turn it around like I'm the bad guy." She threw her hands up, her frustration boiling over. "I'm not saying it's all your fault, but don't pretend you're some innocent victim in this. Relationships are complicated. People change. I've changed." I stood there, feeling the last threads of our connection snap. There was no saving this. No coming back. And for the first time, I didn't want to. I was done. "You're right," I said finally, my voice calm, colder than I intended. "You have changed. And so have I. I'm done fighting for something you already threw away." For a moment, her expression shifted. There was something vulnerable in her eyes, a flicker of realization that maybe she'd miscalculated. But I wasn't falling for it. Not again. This was the end, and I wasn't backing down. "So what now?" she asked, her voice quieter, almost unsure. "No," I said, meeting her gaze with a steady calm. "You get your stuff and you move out. We're done, Emily. For good." Her face hardened again, the vulnerability gone in an instant. She knew it was over, and there was no coming back from this. "Fine," she snapped, turning on her heel and heading for the door. "I'll pack my things, but don't think this is the last you'll hear from me." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The game was over, and she knew it. As I watched her walk into the house, a strange sense of peace settled over me. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. The control she once had over me was gone. The house was dead quiet once she disappeared inside. The air felt heavy, thick with the finality of everything that had just happened. Emily went straight to the bedroom without saying another word, and I didn't follow. I just stood in the living room, leaning against the wall, letting the silence settle around me. It was strange how peaceful it felt now that I'd finally said the words I'd been holding in for so long. "We're done." There was no going back. I heard her moving around upstairs, opening and closing drawers, the faint sound of her phone ringing. Probably calling Claire to come help her, or maybe even that guy. It didn't matter to me. Let her pack. Let her go. This was the moment where it all ended. And for the first time, I wasn't angry. There was no rage left, no bitterness gnawing at me. Just a heavy kind of relief, like I had finally exhaled after holding my breath for months. I sat down on the couch, staring at the empty space that used to feel so suffocating. I thought back to all the nights we'd spent there, watching TV, laughing, planning a future that now felt like a distant memory. It was like another life, one I could barely recognize. The weight of the past few months hit me all at once. How long I had been pretending everything was fine, ignoring all the cracks in our marriage, hoping they would somehow fix themselves. But nothing could fix this. And the truth was, I didn't want to fix it anymore. After about half an hour, I heard her coming down the stairs, her footsteps fast and determined. She appeared in the doorway, holding 2 bags, her face set in a cold, indifferent mask. She didn't look at me, not directly. She just stood there for a second, like she was waiting for me to say something, maybe expecting one last fight or a desperate plea for her to stay. But there was nothing left to say. No more games, no more words. We both knew it was over. "I'll send someone for the rest of my stuff," she said flatly. "I don't want to come back here again." "Good," I replied, not bothering to look at her. "Neither do I." She hesitated, just for a second, like she was about to say something more. But then, without a word, she turned and walked out the door, her bags in hand, leaving the house, and our life, behind her. The sound of the door clicking shut was final. It was the punctuation mark at the end of a story that had dragged on far too long. I didn't get up to watch her drive away. I didn't need to. I knew this was it. She was gone. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at nothing, letting the reality of it all settle in. Emily was out of my life now, and though it felt strange, it also felt right. She wasn't the woman I had fallen in love with anymore. Maybe she hadn't been for a long time, and I had just been too blind to see it. But now, with her gone, it was like I could finally breathe again. The house felt bigger, lighter, as though the weight had been lifted off its walls. Eventually, I stood up and walked through the house, noticing how empty it felt without her things. But the silence wasn't suffocating anymore. It was peaceful, calming. I wandered into the bedroom where she had packed up the last of her things, the closet half empty, drawers left open but bare. Her scent still lingered faintly in the air, but it didn't bother me the way I thought it would. It was just another reminder of what used to be, something I could finally leave behind. I opened the window, letting the cool night air wash over the room, as if it were clearing out the last remnants of her. The divorce papers were already in motion, and soon, everything would be final. The life we had built together would officially be dissolved. But in my mind, it had been over the second she walked out that door to meet him. Later that night, I sat down at the kitchen table, a beer in hand, staring out into the quiet street. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of the future pressing down on me. But this time, it didn't feel terrifying. It felt open, like a blank page waiting for me to write the next chapter. I didn't know what would come next. There was still so much to figure out, how to rebuild my life, what my next steps would be. But for the first time, I felt like I had control again. Emily had made her choices, and now I was making mine. I wasn't the broken man she expected me to be. I wasn't sitting there wallowing in self-pity, waiting for her to come back. I was moving forward, and that was something she could never take from me. As I finished my beer, I couldn't help but think about everything I had learned from this mess, how much I had ignored, how much I had let slide, all because I was afraid to face the truth. If I could give anyone going through something like this one piece of advice, it would be this: don't wait until it's too late. Don't ignore the signs. Don't let someone else control your life or your happiness. If they don't respect you, if they're lying to you, walk away. You deserve better. I stood up, tossed the empty bottle in the trash, and looked around the house one last time. It felt different now. Not a reminder of what I had lost, but a symbol of what I had gained: freedom, clarity, a future where I wasn't constantly questioning whether I was enough. And as I walked upstairs, ready to collapse into bed, I smiled to myself for the first time in a long while. Emily was gone, but I was still here. And for the first time, that felt like enough.